part of the internal pitching hiring process is you'll hear this wankery of agency, we work hard and we play hard kind of stuff. For me, it just hurts my soul. Agency life is about just busting a gut at the beginning, working long hours because you need to provide the work that people above you can take credit for and earn a slice of. It infuriates me that someone can go get their marketing degree from university, come out, and their first experience is working for an owner who has no real formal marketing experience. That person's career is stilted and stunted from that point.
Going to the agency, they had a Google Ads person who was working on this client account, and they also had an SEO person. But what was apparent to me in these meetings is they didn't talk at all.
We're the digital marketing equivalent of boomers, right? When we got out, there were digital jobs that were easy. I started doing marketing the year before Google was founded.
Right.
I couldn't have timed it any better, right?
Yeah, well done.
Well, well done, but lucky as, right?
Jared, good to see you today. Thanks for coming in.
It's good to be back.
Great to be chatting to you. Let's chat about today's topic. I'm excited about this one. We're going to talk about overheads in agencies, agency structures. I've got a fair few thoughts on this topic, but I want to let you go first with talking about, like, you run an agency yourself, obviously. So you've got opinions on this. Clearly, you've built your agency in a certain way because of experiences and views you have. Do you want to just fill us in on that, and then we'll crack into some stories about this topic?
Probably when you hear it, you're probably thinking this sounds like the most boring episode, but I promise you it's actually pretty interesting. One of the things I took into designing Fractal was just an acute awareness of just how expensive it is to run an agency, and those overheads that you need to cover in an agency that has to be passed on and covered by the client. I think the biggest one for me is office space. Like, I now run a remote first agency, which is to say everyone works from home almost all the time. We probably catch up once a month. So it's almost completely remote, but everyone's sort of based in a close enough geographical area we could drive and see each other if we wanted to. My main reason for doing that is work-life balance for me. So my agency and my rules, I do it the way I want to do it. But also, I just found that running a mid-tier or a large agency, Monday was about paying for the office. Like, you didn't start even paying for your staff until Tuesday. I now use it as a counter pitch part, and maybe someone who's listening will be like, oh, Gerard told me that was part of his pitch process. But it's true. I would say, yes, if you can walk into a glass meeting room, if you turn up and there's someone to greet you at reception, they're full-time employed by that agency, and they're on the third floor, and you turn up and there's pastries and there's coffee, you're paying for that. Now, if it's a pitch, someone else is paying for it, right? That cost, that office, those Hermes chairs, that glass table, that big projector and TV and everything, you're paying for all of that. And I just think there's just this level of inefficiency and almost a blissful ignorance. Some people just get tickled by that and they enjoy it. For me, Fractal works with owners, which means that the owners are watching their dollars and they're like, I don't want to be paying for that. Now, in a bigger agency who's pitching to mid-high level workers, where actually they don't really care, it's about looking good, they'll love that kind of stuff. So for me, I just try to help people recognize what they're doing. And if you're a director, CMO for a large global company, you'll probably enjoy the glass office, the pastries and the drinks after. If you're a business owner and you're working with Fractal, you don't want me to take you out for a beer. I mean, I don't even drink, but you don't want pastries from me. You don't want coffees from me because that you're paying for that. And that's what I like. For me, it just started to rub me the wrong way that there's all these overheads. And so I think that there's office costs, like the physical office costs. I think that those office costs, and we won't go into remote, but there's a cost to staff for commuting. I think then you're also paying for, you're paying for support staff. And that's, I think at a low level, that's a very necessary cost. But then you're paying for the hierarchy of staff beyond that. And these global companies have a lot of very expensive people who all have platinum and gold frequent flyer miles. And that's not so clear. But those people exist. They travel, they fly. And whilst they're holding groups, so I'm talking Interpublic, Dentsu, WPP, Omnicom, there's probably another one in there I've forgotten. They've got these structures and they'll talk about flattening them down. They'll talk about efficiencies, but we don't live in that world anymore. That made sense in the 90s. It doesn't make sense now with telecommunications, video conferencing. Like, you don't need to be flying around. They don't need those tickets. And I just think that structure is ultimately going to die. I just think the world has moved on. I don't think those holding groups can continue to exist in this pyramid of people, because that's what you're paying for. You know, like I think as you said, you're paying for people, and that's what you're hiring. And I think that cost is just so great. And I mean, we can talk about it, but I think ultimately that burden's borne by the lowest people in that pyramid. They're the ones that ultimately carry the weight. And there's ways and strategies and processes that are done to achieve that. And I just don't like it, to be short.
Yeah. And also this idea of paying this high hourly rate, and you might talk to a senior person, especially in the pitch, but the actual work you get from the agency is from a grad potentially.
Yeah.
That's who's working on it.
And, as I alluded to, I think, look, part of the internal pitching hiring process is you'll hear this wankery of agency, we work hard and we play hard kind of stuff. For me, it just hurts my soul. But it's this idea, and there's just these simple tricks, right? So you'll hear old agency guys lament, there used to be the drinks trolley. I mean, there was a drinks trolley in every agency I worked for, Friday afternoon beers. That doesn't happen as much anymore, mostly to the credit of the younger generations coming through. They're not big drinkers. They're like, hey, I'm here to work. I'll go out with my friends. Thanks. I think that's awesome, right? I don't think they consciously realize, they being the generations below me, I don't think they quite realize the flex they're pulling. But it's those drinks trolleys that keep you there on Friday pushing through. It's the pizza dinner and the Ubers home. It used to be like a black cab in London, where if you're still at the agency at 9 o'clock, you can book a black cab home. Like, the luxury of a black cab. Instead of getting a licensed minicab in London, you get a black cab home and you could charge it back. Sounds great, right? So even if it cost me 50 quid, which it probably didn't, that's still damn cheap to have me working. Work finishes at 6. I'm still there at 11 o'clock and I'm getting a 50. That's the cheapest 4 hours of overtime ever. A couple of beers, couple of drinks, right? That trick of providing food and drink and sustenance to get you in, the early morning breakfast. If you get here before 8, you get a free breakfast. Like if you quantify that, it's great value for the agency. And for you, it's actually horrendous. Like, it's not where you should be spending your time and what you should be doing. The reality is, and the way these pyramid structures work, is that there's people at the top that need to clip the ticket on all the people on the way down. And so agency life is about just busting a gut at the beginning, working long hours, because you need to provide the work that people above you can take credit for and earn a slice of. And so agency life is all about putting more people underneath you, which means you're climbing over people all the time. The more people underneath you, the smaller amount, the more you can sort of increase your potential salary, because you can take claim for more people who are underneath it. And what it does is it pushes that workload down so that the people at the bottom have to work late. Like, they're just, they're there and they're working from 8. They're arriving before, they're working from 8. They're pushing through until 6. They're doing the late night pitches, and people put that pressure on you. And unfortunately, it's cyclical, because then that person makes their way from an analyst to an exec, from an exec to an account manager, and then they're an account manager and they've got a few other people. And then they start to put it like, I did it, you need to do it as well. And you kind of look and you go, how are you so jaded at 24, 25 that you're already imposing, like, back in my day, And it's like, you almost boomify a 25-year-old. It's depressing.
I'm thinking in terms of the structure, and some of the things that I've seen go wrong when I'm dealing with agencies is the idea too, and it'll be interesting to get your take on this, because like I'll work with a client and they might already be working with an agency. And I can think of one situation in particular where I would come into these meetings with the client and with the agency, and I'm obviously trying to bring everything together, the marketing strategist trying to stitch everything together. But going to the agency, they had a Google Ads person who was working on this client account, and they also had an SEO person. But what was apparent to me in these meetings is they didn't talk at all. And I thought that the value for a business going to an agency would have been that centralized, point of contact. Otherwise, why wouldn't you just go to 2 freelancers yourself? If they're not going to talk, if this is not going to be a centralized thing, especially for Google Ads and SEO, right, where they're both in search. Like, it's you want to be considering both when you're putting together a plan. They would talk to each other in the meetings that we were having with them. That's when they'd converse. So, like to me, and that was with the client at the time, I'm like, if you're going to go agency, I thought, like, it's better. You're there kind of to centralize things a bit and to have a broader skills, but you kind of want those people to be working together, not in silos within an agency.
It boggles my mind that today digital, like agencies that are predominantly digital, are applying factory level processes, and they're producing people that are siloed in their discipline like they're building Model T Fords. It doesn't make sense to me. Like you said, you have someone doing paid search and doing SEO, but even more to that, you can go into an agency and you'll meet someone who does on-site SEO and technical SEO and someone who does off-site, and you'll speak to the technical guy about off-site. He'll go, I don't do off-site, I don't do link building. And you just kind of go, how is this a thing? I don't know if it's consciously done, but I think by siloing people's skill set, you kind of restrict their growth. And then you end up sort of saying to people, so you progress through your career, you get really good at on-site SEO. You either become the head of the discipline, which then you just become an overhead on everybody else, or at some point you get a promotion and then the client expects you to be able to stitch all these different things together. You move from being sort of like head of SEO to like a group account director or whatever made up titles we come up with. Probably vice president if it's an American owned agency. Or senior vice president even, imagine that. And then you're expected to understand this umbrella notion of tying these things together. And you would meet these people all the time. They go, I've got no idea what's happening. And to better understand it, visualize graphically your skill set. And so if you're being siloed, I imagine your skill set being vertical. And the amount of money you can charge and what you're paid is about the depth. So if you're doing on-site SEO and you're technically the best, there's a point where you can be so deep in your knowledge, you can charge a lot of money. You might be, $140,000, $150,000 a year if you're really, really good at technical on-site SEO working for a good agency. Awesome. My view is that the modern marketer's shape shouldn't be long and strong. It should be a triangle. And the triangle idea is that, yes, you want depth. So you want your speciality. And that might be that you want to focus on off-site SEO. Great. So it's about link building, and that's where you cut your teeth. And you might be deep on that. So that's the middle of your triangle. But you need to be willing to step just outside and say, I'm not as good with my sort of content writing or content production, but I understand the value of the content and the blog writing to inbound links. And then when I understand blog writing, I understand the importance of video, and then video engagement, and then video editing, and then sound production. And then I understand those elements, and I've played a little bit around with sound, and then I'm like, actually, I could probably work with the person who's doing the audio and the radio. And maybe we can come up with a theme that extends the TV advertising and the radio advertising onto a podcast and onto video. And so that skill set that becomes a triangle means that you can lend yourself. And I think if an agency structure is set up that you lock someone into a silo and give them a specialty, I think you're just doing a disservice to one, the person and their career path, their lack of experience and opportunities. You're doing a disservice to the client because I think they're getting a narrow view and it's disconnected, as you said. Like, why would you be doing that? In addition to that, you then have to put your strategic person on top of it to kind of bridge the gap in between, which is another overhead.
Well, that's what I was doing effectively in this case. Yeah.
And you just go, this can't be the most efficient way of doing it. And I look at it and go, that lack of interconnectivity, that inefficiency in the way things have done, that lack of growth just creates just inefficiencies. And like you said, sometimes these different groups are only meeting each other back in front of the client. Now, to confess, with the way that Fractal's set up, we have open meetings where we work with the clients. We have a weekly whip where we do genuinely just discuss what we're going to do and we debate it there. But that's because we work on like low cost, frequent, rapid sprints. But in an agency world where you might be meeting these clients once a month, but the retainer's 15 to 25,000 a month, you kind of expect that they've spoken before this. In reality, it's probably in the back of the taxi while they're driving out to see you and they're still on the laptop trying to produce PowerPoint slides. I think the way the structures are set up, the depth of those structures are just so inefficient. And that's before you get to all the ancillary services. So like the multi-levels of financial people, all the levels of HR, they all serve a purpose and we can, touch on different elements of that. But to me, it's these layers of strategy and vision and things that sit above all these silo departments where the inefficiency is. And you are ultimately paying for these people. And, you're probably not seeing them on your account. They're probably only touching small things, but they're taxing that junior worker who just is grinding away. Some of them make it. It's very gladiatorial. Like a few people make it to the end. A few people get some glorious titles. And then they're able to clip the ticket on everybody else who's underneath it. You know, those hours of working, it's tough. And then, as you touched on, the client will naturally try to reverse engineer the cost model. And they'll sit on the room and kind of go, are we paying $125 an hour for them? Like, and you know, and you can see them doing it, and they're trying to work out in their head, what does that work out? What's their salary? On one hand, I hate that anyone tries to reverse engineer someone else's business. It's like, how much do they pay for those shoes? What's the cost? What do they get paid? It's a recipe for disaster and a lack of satisfaction, right? As soon as you start trying to break down and cost anything you've done, I think you just get depressed. But if you get to that situation, something's triggered it. And I think it is really hard to look at a rate card and look across the room and kind of look at someone who's got months, like single months worth of experience. And you're looking at that hourly rate and thinking, I don't see how that works. And what I think you've got to understand is those costs are buried somewhere up above. And it's either structural costs, office, and operational costs and people around them to make it happen, which is usually from a lack of operating procedures and fluidity in what they're doing, or hierarchy. And the bigger the agency, the bigger the hierarchy stack. And I do feel like if I was ever, put into one of these situations where they said, you've got to like turn one of these big holding groups around. Yeah, I would just pick a job title and probably anyone that's title says senior VP, junior VP, VP, because just vice president bit just grates me as an Australian. You just go, I wonder what would happen if I just sacked everyone that had that title. Like, that's the criteria. What would happen? You go, I mean, it's very Trump-esque to talk like that. But but the inefficiencies, it's brutal. It's absolutely brutal.
Well, and I thought too about the situation that I looked at with these two people. Like, if they can get away with it and not talk to each other, that seemed like a saving on the agency's part, because they would have to spend time, like maybe they'd have to put an hour a week or a couple hours a week into actually getting together and staying aligned or whatever. So I was thinking, when I've seen this situation, I've thought that's maybe the motivation, is that it's just more cost for the agency to talk.
Yeah, I don't think agencies rationalize it. It's just a result of the beast they're in. Like, they've just got such limited time. Like, I think what helps is to understand the default way that an agency is going to drive profit is just to make people work harder. Like, that is just the brutal reality is, and anyone who's worked in a large group agency will know this pain. You lost a staff member, they're moving on. That staff member then needs to be replaced, and they go, well, we're going to try to hire the person internally first. And that process doesn't really start until the person's like out the door. From the CFO's point of view, every week that you don't hire that person is profit. It's just profit. And they'll continue to drag that out. And they'll drag it out for as long as they can, because if they then have to go out and, you're there internally going, can we get an agency? Can we hire a recruiter? Can we get a recruiter? And the recruiters are pitching you, and you're leveraging, going, I've got a guy, he's got a great candidate. And they're like, you can't use external recruiters. They've got to be on our board or our panel. Rates have got to be pre-approved. And that whole process, and then you finally find someone, and then they've got 2 months worth of notice. You're 4 months in and you haven't replaced the person. The client's going, Mike's been gone for a few months now. Who's covering him? And maybe you've faked somebody else in, but that's the profit, and that's where the margins are found. And it just doesn't work. Like, it's when you're selling people and you're selling time, then that's the quickest way to go about doing it. I think it's what leads to just so much burnout and turnover. But understanding that, and I think I've been lucky enough that I have worked with a few clients who really do appreciate it, and they know what it is, and they've been supportive, and they even put pressure back on the agency, which is to find the people and make sure they've got the time. You do get great clients like that, and ones that really understand how it works. I think once you understand that that's what's happening, and that cost is borne by those cheapest people, I think it helps when you are looking back and you sort of go, why? When you think, why am I paying so much for that person? And, I guess resist that temptation to quantify someone down to their hourly rate. But yeah, if you're not getting that visualization of who's the person above who's clipping the ticket and taking some of their time, that if you're not seeing or hearing from them, I think the way to view it is, instead of like being annoyed at that person who you kind of look at and go, why am I paying so much per hour for them? Feel more sorry for them, because they're having to carry the hours to make up the gap that's in between. I think anyone who's been through that as a young marketer, they know what it is. They know how hard they have to work. It's tough. And, maybe if some of the Fractal staff are listening to the podcast, I don't know why they'd be wanting to listen to me any more than they do already. But, it's like that's why I push so hard on these things, is to try to get that work-life balance right for them.
Well, it sounds like you're doing an awesome job at that. So, yeah, it's you do have an agency model, and that's why I wanted to bring you on as well. That is quite unique, I think. I'm quite critical of agencies publicly. And in a lot of ways, actually, you're one of the people I think of, and I kind of feel bad. Like there's probably 3 or 4 agencies who I think aren't too bad, do a good job. It's really awesome to hear the behind the scenes. I'm sure people who've maybe been client side as marketers, which I have been, well, basically the whole time. That's very insightful. But also, I'm sure you're speaking the language of a lot of people who are working in an agency at the moment.
Yeah, and look, if you've been doing it for long enough, you can do your numbers in your head, right? So if you've got a junior person, because I just think people are probably doing numbers in their heads now. They're probably trying to figure it out. You've got someone who's a recent graduate. They're getting paid $50,000 a year. They're getting paid 12.5% super on top of that. They get paid holiday and sick leave and public holidays. So you've got about 240 working days. They're probably active for about 5 hours out of the 7.5 that they should be working, assuming they're not worked harder than that. So, what does that work out to be? Well, to get back to that price point and cover their salary, they need to be charging $50 an hour. That used to be horrendous. That's not too bad. So as a freelancer and you're doing your own model, if you want to get paid $50,000 a year, before everything, you need to be charging about $50 an hour, working 5 hours a day, and you'll get there and you can give yourself holiday. Now, when you factor in all your overheads, so the multiplier on a typical group agency will be like 2 to 2.5, depending on how big their staff is. So if it's 2.5, you can work that out. It's $150 an hour. 2.1 is pretty normal, so about $125 an hour. That's how you get there. When you break all that down, and I just did super. And for anyone, by the way, who just paused the podcast and got their calculator to work something out, I hear you, I see you. You did that, and I think we could be friends. But and I guarantee someone's done that. Someone's now listening to it going, I did pause it, and I did get my calculator out my iPhone. I did try to work out what I should be charging as a freelancer, because I'm a bit lazy with these things. But I think if I've got that right in my head, $50,000 is $50 an hour. So just drop off the thousands, and that's about right? So if you want to get $100,000 a year worth of salary as a freelancer, that you probably need to be charging about $100 an hour. So it's not that hard. But if you're building a Model and you're in an agency group, you need to be charging $200 for the same person, right? Mm-hmm. Now, there's lots of pros, right? We've already discussed that, right? An agency structure means that instead of having a single freelancer who has, even if they've got a pyramid of experience, that person can't pull in from those other experts. If you have a well-run agency, if they can interchange and share ideas, then you can justify that. If they've got a senior marketer. So if you've got someone and you're looking and going, how am I paying $125 an hour for that person? And you do judge by experience, and they've got 3 months, 6 months of experience. Yeah, but if they've got a Jack who's above them, and Jack's bringing in, a decade and a half or more, and something like that, Jack. We're probably older than we think. Yeah,
that's about roughly right. Yeah.
Worth of experience. Well, you're borrowing some of that, and then Jack's lifting that person up, and so that's how you get that rate card, and that's how agencies justify it. And so you've got to look at that mix. Right? How many junior, mid-level, senior people are they in the account? That's how you get, and that's how you can justify $125 an hour, because you've got interdepartmental synergies, mm-hmm. You've got strategic and experience advice passing down. If you do it well, it is well justified. And so you shouldn't just look and go, I'm paying $125 a head for that early 20-something person. No, what you're paying for is them to do the grunt work and probably work really damn hard for you. But the experience above is filtering down. The experience from the parallel skill sets filtering across. Spend more time looking at the way the structure, the interrelationships work. In your situation, if the agency is, if they're talking together for the first time, or you see them introducing themselves in the waiting room, you're probably in trouble, and you need to think about $50 an hour. But if there's synergy, if they know each other, if they're joking and they finishing each other's sentences, I was going to say sandwiches, but that's different.
That's a new one. I haven't heard that one before. But is that what people do when they get close? Is that?
Well, the recent quote was from the movie Frozen, but you haven't got kids, so you didn't go through the Frozen.
No, I didn't.
And then I think that was a parody on the Saturday Night Live. But anyway, I digress. Again, people who get it, and they'll be like, Gerard's got kids and he lived through the Frozen period. Oh, where's it SNL? Anyway, that'll be one of the takeaways. You'll learn how Frozen is related to
agency life. Yeah.
I think understanding that dynamic and how it works. So I would like to think in my agency, like we really only got 2 levels, right? I've got myself and Pete with our experience, and then and everybody else, right?
Yeah.
There's really not much
And
there.
Pete being another experienced marketer who works with you. Senior marketer.
And Pete and I are different, right? So we're different triangles. So I am very marketing heavy. Pete is more technology led. So Pete's sort of more of a technologist, and we sit in our domain. So if we're trying to set up pixels or tracking and things aren't working, Pete will solve that. Pete tends to be more understanding as we go through processes with clients. I can be a bit of a brute. So we're different, and we lend that skill and experience down to our team, and our team have got that relationship. And so how would you assess that? You know, if you're talking to one of the Fractal staff members, you want to find out, are they having jokes about Gerard? Can they talk about me behind my back, about my life and who I am as a person? Do they know my kids' names? If they know those things, that's an interesting test, actually. I wonder if they do know, or they know my kids' names. It's that understanding, right? And if we've got that relationship, then you know that the work will be flowing back and forth as well. Like if we've got that personal relationship, if the work and experiences is flowing back and forth, then that's how I'm adding value, and that's how I'm charging more. And I don't look, you know, Fractal doesn't charge $125 for a graduate, but in fact, we don't even charge by the hour. But if you can see that, I think it's justified. And I guess the essence of what I'm saying here is, if you've got these isolated junior staff that are having to do everything, and as you point out, what's the point? Like, why pay that overhead if people are just clipping the ticket but not providing any value? If those senior mid-level marketers are integrating the teams, they're working between the silos and sharing, they're taking that experience down, then it is worth it. And that will change from team to team. But I think for the client side, you need to understand what that is. And if you think that they're isolated and they're not linked together, question it. If you think that what the overheads you're paying aren't being justified in information coming down, then question it. If you're paying $50 an hour, it's a solopreneur, entrepreneur, consultant, freelancer, great. Well, that's what you should be paying. Don't question. I'm not saying that all freelancers should be paid $50 an hour. Probably a lot should be paid more than that. But understand that they've got their overheads, right, as a starting point, and then understand that if they can tap into other people, then there's going to be those increased costs. And then understand, as a business, if you're a business owner, decide if you want to pay for the pastries in the morning. If you're a mid-tier marketer, then take the free pastries and charge it back to your boss, right? It's horses for courses and what you want. But I think the agency world and service model world would be better if people fully appreciated how those costs work, and they can be empathetic to their agency and what they provide and help provide that structure. And at the same time, not work with the agencies where they're not seeing it. It's not financially beneficial. It's not in their interest in terms of delivery. And it's not creating a world where marketers, junior marketers, like I say, it's the wrong way to say it, but new to marketing marketers aren't given opportunity to grow. One side point to that is, I am forever frustrated that companies are hiring a single marketer to come in and work for their company. I realize this is a bit of a different tangent, but it infuriates me that someone can go get their marketing degree from university, come out, and their first experience is working for an owner who has no real formal marketing experience. That person's career is stilted and stunted from that point. Mm-hmm. Who do they go to learn from? They are probably having the entire company's profitability, like the success of the company is going to be tied to them.
Yeah, yes.
That's brutal. I genuinely think you are doing a disservice to the person you hire. If you cannot guide and shape that person, please let them go to an agency, hire them, right? Or find the person you want, and then go give them to Fractal and pay Fractal and let me guide them and bring them up and get them the experience until they have enough experience that you can genuinely put some responsibility on, not responsibility to do work, the responsibility to deliver results. If you're hiring a graduate or someone with less than a year's experience and you're hiring for results, then you're a shit boss, right? Really shit. And so you've got to go, the junior marketers that you're paying $50 an hour for or $125 an agency and it's killing you, they're the future marketing managers that you will hire and give responsibility for, but they're learning from the other people around them. And if we don't support the ecosystem and the way for these people to get that experience, then yeah, we're going to really struggle later on because no one's going to get that. And with the advent of AI and systems, there are less jobs for junior marketers to cut their teeth on. You know, that the copywriting for social media ads, which is only in the last 10 years, those jobs are disappearing because numpties like me can turn up, plug something in the chat GPT, spin out something that looks pretty good with a whole lot of hyphens in it, and, you know, and put it up, and it works, you know? And I was lucky enough to grow up through a pure digital age, and so I got that experience. I don't know what, you know, I'm going to sound all my 46 years of age here. I don't know what the kids are going to do these days because they don't get the chance to get that experience. And so if they're not getting the chance to do it, to learn it, then the only way to get it is to get it passed down from someone with more experience.
That's an interesting take. I like the fact that they need to get it from someone passing it down, because my fear as well for younger marketers was, well, there won't be junior jobs as much. So where do you start? We can sit above that, but we've got the experience to sit above that.
We're the digital marketing equivalent of boomers, right? When we got out, there were digital jobs that were easy. There was trafficking jobs, right? Just people who would just copy budgets across in Excel. And these things existed when we were kids. They don't exist anymore, right? So our marketing junior jobs are the equivalent of $60,000 houses that our parents bought. Maybe it's important as marketers that we acknowledge our privilege of growing up in a pure digital. I mean, I started doing marketing the year before Google was founded.
Right.
I couldn't have timed it any better, right?
Yeah, well done.
Well, well done, but lucky as, right?
Yeah.
Like it's the same as my dad buying a house on like 2 times income. Like how good was that? So anyone who's listening to this who's like under 25, just be like, fist pumping in the air. I want you to be, I was going to say it's like Breakfast Club, right? And you won't know the example, but I want it, no, you'll know it because you will have watched Pitch Perfect where they redid. Jack's looking at me going, I have no idea what you're talking about.
I'm looking at you with a blank face, but I'm sure, I'm hoping the people listening along know what you're talking about.
Anyone who's punching the air now and saying, don't you forget about me, and walking off. If you're in your 40s or 50s, you're thinking Breakfast Club. If you're 20s or 30s, you're thinking Pitch Perfect. If you're under that, you're going, I don't know what you're talking about, right? So we can play that generational game. Like, what's your reference point here? I'm very much the Breakfast Club generation. And Jack's still looking at me going, I don't know what you're talking about.
I've heard of the Breakfast Club. I have heard of it. I don't know anything more about it than I've heard of it. But yeah, on that note, we might wrap up. Thank you for taking the time to come in. They're very insightful. Thanks for filling us in on. You've got a lot of experience with agency over, like you'd be 20, 25 years experience in agencies
25,
now?
yeah.
Yeah, okay. So versus my 0. So thank you very much for coming in and sharing all that. Speaking of agencies, if someone wanted to perhaps work with you or find you, chat to you, where should they go?
I think if you Google Fractal and you find me, it's a Fractal agency. Google something like that. We don't optimize it too well. If you find the running cap brand, that's not us, but actually the guys make really good running caps. So if you've spelt it incorrectly, I'm not going to do it now, you found running caps, that's not us, but they are good kit. So hit up those guys. Good Queensland startup that didn't get the domain name.
Right. Okay. Well, you can get 2. You can find 2 good companies.
That's the worst pitch ever. No one's going to be able to follow those instructions.
I do have the notes, links to everything in the description of the episode. So look there to find Gerard. But thanks for coming in and chatting to me.
Thanks, Jack.